This is going to be a series of lessons on the Secret Tree of Alchemy. This is something I kind of walked into discovering back in 1998, and I first published on this subject on the first day of spring in 1999 on a website that I created called Orange Space on the internet, on a GeoCities website that I put together. Of course, GeoCities was eventually bought out by Yahoo and then just disappeared. But it took till about 2007 before that website finally disappeared, except in mirror form on the internet. And it was not successful as a site, but I learned a tremendous amount during that period of time. And I created most of the graphics that I still use today to include on this presentation. And I made some excellent scans of tarot cards back then, high fidelity scans, which I'm going to use also. This Secret Tree of Alchemy is as ancient as the swastika is, as far as I'm concerned, and came out of Asia and filtered into, I would guess, Indian and Persian channels at some point, and I think became an important basis of all of the Abrahamic paradigm cults, to include Islam, but secretly, and is presently the secret basis for much of the symbolism that is used in Hollywood and in the music industry. It's basically pretty much used by organized criminal networks, underground networks, to the exclusion of anyone else. And it's not a compulsory thing as far as I know. I haven't detected any, threat of violence over the issue. But they have been successful in keeping it secret and making exclusive use of it. It is the skeletal basis for the development of the Kabbalah, which to me is a slave glyph compared with the Secret Tree of Alchemy. Kabbalah is a closed system that you keep yourself pretty much trapped inside of on an intellectual level, with a moralization system attached, which has some, superficial value, but does not explain everything nearly as well as does the Secret Tree of Alchemy. The Secret Tree of Alchemy is an open system it mirrors the structure of the human memory system, the mind, the way the mind works in conducting itself intelligently. It's an analogy-based system. It makes use of analogy as a means of categorization of ideas. You can get nosological with it in trying to understand, the various diseases of humanity and the mind, psychology. It also accounts for such things as mathematics, various kinds of truths. It's superb for that, as far as I can tell so far. Philosophy, science. It has a biological perspective right down there at the bottom of the tree. It accounts for realities and dreams and dimensions and gods and deities and archetypes, and as a useful mapping system for working with ideas of psychology. So far, it hasn't really shown any weakness in that regard. I've been studying this now for 25 years, and I'm just getting the point now where I'm walking into discoveries all over again with this system. It's as though I'm finally maturing into understanding this system to the point where, every time I think I've become quote-unquote world-class in my understanding of it, I discover that, I really don't understand that much, and here I go again, walking into things. And back in the late 90s, I pretty much just walked into discovering this system. So how exactly does one walk into things anyway? This is a good question. The answer to that question is you just allow yourself to go there. This is an excellent place to start here, because that's basically what I did back in the late 90s. Prior to that point, I had been involved in several years of study since about 1988. That's about a decade, really. And I was looking for answers to questions that involve, a lot of what you might call suffering in life, solutions to these problems. And eventually I ran across such things as orgone biophysics and the work of Dr. Wilhelm Reich as useful sources of information on human nature, neurosis, and political issues associated with all of that. And this was important to my intellectual development and preparing me to be able to, shall we say, walk right into this discovery. On top of human psychology, like the psychology of Carl Jung, and Jung and Reich were both excellent sources of information on Neo-Freudianism and Freud's ideas, to the point where I found myself even recently ascribing some of Freud's ideas to people like Jung and having to correct myself. That's how much I was into reading Wilhelm Reich and Carl Jung back then. And I've only more recently gotten into Freud in conjunction with my education. I have a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology. And I'm trying to make arrangements to get into higher education to develop a career in psychology. But back to the core subject matter here. Back in the late 90s, I had started reading into astrology more specifically, and was studying my own birth chart and doing all the standard things you do when you study astrology. And prior to that, I had been, collecting up some books on popular occultism. I collected up a good number of books by Eliza Crowley and didn't read one of them, for example. I started to read the Book of the Law, and as soon as he had said that if you dispose of this book, you should burn it, I tossed it in the trash. And then I bought another copy and eventually sold that copy off. So I haven't read Eliza Crowley, but I did accept his tarot cards for detailed study. And on top of that, I had read several books by Dion Fortune, where she had stated that everything that she had stated in her books was true, but she could not reveal to you the truth, or something along those lines. And that just jogged my mind a certain way, and kind of was part of my preparation for this, I suppose, because I was starting to look for this hidden truth that they seem to be hinting at. And then I happened to notice the 10 of discs in the Crowley deck, the Thoth Tarot deck. And I noticed the structure of it. And I noticed that it seemed like certain parts of it were hidden. The Gemini part, the Aquarius part, the Capricorn part. At the time, I didn't realize that had symbolized, how your head and your hands are essentially chopped off in the Kabbalah. But I realized that tarot card revealed the complete structure that the Kabbalah was based on. And since I was studying astrology, then it's only a hop, skip, and a jump to pattern astrological ideas over that system, that pattern, that design, glyph design, if you will. And I came to a realization that Pisces goes on the bottom and the top. It's the two fish swimming around each other in a circle symbolism at work. One fish is up high and the other fish is down low, and it becomes like a yin-yang symbol, which is a spiritual symbol. How the spirit grounds itself in the biology through biological energies and the emotions and the intuition and the quiet voice inside as the basis for understanding spiritual interaction with reality. Spirit is, of course, ideas, dimensions. You could call it higher beings from a variety of perspectives, whether it be bigger or other dimensional, or simply more sophisticated or powerful, or simply story characters that seem to take on a life of their own. But also ideation of various kinds, essential ideas, fundamental ideas, and how these essential ideas ground themselves into reality. But once I had made that discovery with the fish, it was a simple matter of taking the next step and the next step and the next step and just studying it. So you're basically just walking right into it. You allow yourself to go there. You throw a few emotional fits early on, I think I threw away at least one tarot deck. That would be a really nice vintage deck to own right now, in fact. And then I go out and buy another one and start all over again. And of course, I still haven't read the Book of the Law, or much Crowley, really, outside the context of studying these tarot cards. And that's pretty much it. It's captured in the symbolism of the moon out of the Thoth Tarot. You simply walk right into it. It's not that much different from, a beetle walking along beach sand and further inland. And then it becomes kind of a manifest destiny thing, similar to what was done in the United States, moving from east to west throughout the history of the United States. That particular terminology has been demonized, but the alchemical concepts behind it are valid and quite reliable. Now, what was actually happening back then when I was preparing the way for myself to make this discovery, which is the same kind of discovery thousands and thousands of people have made throughout human history and earlier times, was that I was basically making use of something that we learn about in psychology called priming. This is where we are laying the groundwork for learning something or discovering something, maybe within ourselves or in the environment around us, by doing such things as asking questions. We ask ourselves a simple question, and the mind is already beginning to make arrangements for answering that question, even before you realize it. The mind will begin to make certain ideas and memories and experiences and other people, even, you could argue, more readily accessible to you to help you along in making whatever discoveries you have to make. Of course, when one asks oneself a question, one should be open to the possibility of that question being answered by oneself, primarily, but also possibly by other people that you might meet. It's a real mystery how people meet each other and get to know each other and provide answers to questions for each other. It's as mysterious as the way the mind works itself, the way the dimensions of the universes work together, and producing something like karmic interaction, and you could argue reincarnation into existence on Earth. Now, looking at this tarot card, the Ten of Discs, which has the word wealth underneath it, you'll notice up in near the top, but just beneath the top coin, there is a coin that looks rather like a tombstone. And there's another coin that's arranged as though some kind of a surface, like a grassy surface or whatever, at a cemetery. That is where Gemini would go in the Secret Tree of Alchemy. That's where it goes, in fact. But here, it is quote-unquote dead and buried. And this is equivalent to having, your cerebral cortex removed. There's a scene in the movie Excision where someone is in a dream is laying in an autopsy pan, a stainless steel pan, and they've had the top of their head chopped off very neatly, as though it were blasted away somehow. And this is kind of equivalent to that. There's also in this imagery implied symbolically a loss of the hands, though there's some manner of the hands still evident there as coins that are highlighted in those positions where Aquarius and Capricorn would be located in the Secret Tree of Alchemy. This is as though you still have your hands, but your hands aren't the wonders that they could be. They're not as revealing of information, in other words. And that is, revelation of information is what we wonder about in life. We wonder after it. We wonder looking for answers to questions. In philosophy, wondering is a primary thing. I believe Aristotle, at least, related that idea. But somehow the hands are not as wondrous or wonderful here. But I guess they're still there, but effectively, in many respects, they're chopped off, same as the top of the head here. And that hints, in my view, to the effect that Kabbalah is a system of slavery. Secret Tree of Alchemy, in comparison, is relative freedom. And you could use that terminology very descriptively for what it maps out as a mind-reality map. It maps out relative intellectual, emotional, human freedom. And it is only a map, therefore it is only a tool, but a tool provides leverage, especially when it is used correctly. Now, further interpretation of this Ten of Discs card, on a more optimistic level, this burial site that's been put in the place of the Gemini position, it can symbolize the unconscious mind. And at this level of mind, you're talking about something that you simply do not experience consciously, but which operates with utmost intelligence. And it does influence your life, and very often you could argue it finds expressions through the hands, as though the hands are revealing on that level. Hands very often act as adjuncts to what we say, as one example. So the two coins on the bottom of the tree in the Capricorn and the Aquarius positions, these coins are highlighted, but they're left blank. They're like blank slate coins. And this could symbolize, the hands communicating practically anything they want to communicate without you even realizing it's happening. All these other coins that are highlighted as though they are a monetary system that means something to you, specifically in your dimension or reality of, financial existence or whatever. Those coins are, the symbolism on those coins is a lot more fixed in comparison to that grave site up in Gemini and these two blank slate coins on the bottom. And that's just an optimistic approach to interpreting this particular card. And it's easy to get cynical with interpretations, especially in a dangerous world where it seems like this specific knowledge is used to such great and destructive effect upon people, for example, in popular media. Now, this idea of priming, much of what you're doing in life involves basically kicking around and doing the equivalent of, reading a chapter from a textbook, and before you start reading, you look at all the headings in the chapter and all the bold-faced ideas that seem to stand out while you're paging through the chapter. That's priming. And this is very often done with things like, playing cards, draw cards, or whatever. You page through them, and you're basically looking at all the images and noticing things that stand out in your mind for some reason, but you don't really know why. That is equivalent to priming. You're priming your mind. And this particular tarot card illustrates how that process can be undermined and replaced effectively with what amounts to various forms of do as you are told. And of course, the tombstone symbolism here is apt because a tombstone is something you read. To jump into some initially cynical interpretation here, reading is an important issue in out-of-body vampirism because it's something that has become weaponized in civilization. And the idea is that the dominant reader is also the most wealthy, because reading and wealth have become synonymous. Though this card also relates ideas to the effect that earthly associations, the earth element, the coins, are also a means of wealth, which also happens to be a theme that shows up in that video clip from Old Enough that I played earlier in this lesson. Coming into contact with perspective associations is one means of coming into contact with wealth in the physical world. But also, reading is a way of coming into contact with perspective wealth. The more you read, you have already accrued a kind of wealth. And that wealth can be mishandled even right from the beginning. For example, if you believe things that are not true that you've read, that puts you into a position of either losing out on wealth or maintaining compromised wealth, to include criminally compromised wealth. And doing as you're told under those circumstances can be very dangerous. Voracious reading has become, a means of climbing the social ladder. But it also has symbolic connotations, or relates symbolic connotations associated with the idea of cannibalism, it being a form of cannibalism. And it just so happens that in out-of-body vampirism, you are essentially practicing a form of cannibalism on people. Of a spiritual nature, of an etheric nature, energy body nature, animal magnetic nature. And it's very dangerous, and it becomes a real problem in people's lives that they can clue into and be absolutely horrified by. And that's just one interpretation. This particular card is one of the Gemini cards that goes in the Gemini stack. The card itself relates its place in the Secret Tree of Alchemy as belonging in Gemini. It is buried there. It is the bottom card in the stack, so to speak. And that's what that tombstone symbolism up there also symbolizes. And I just gave you like 3 or 4 interpretations of this one card right off the cuff. That's the nature of symbolism at work. Symbolism is always open to interpretation. And getting good at that kind of thing, accurately interpreting symbolism is much akin to the skill set used in accurately interpreting reality itself. Being true, being accurate, and being, genuine in interacting with others at the same time is an important part of building a kind of wealth in life. A material wealth, yes, but wealth is something that is heavily networked too, which is another Gemini analogy. The idea of networking, social networking, telephone networking, monetary systems that network together. And the Secret Tree of Alchemy itself is symbolic of its own kind of field harmonic networking through the dimensions, or some dimensions, which you could construe as symbolized by the bright yellow and green coins in this card, are particularly harmonic with our reality. They harmonize with us more. And one of the ways of shutting off somebody's mind is you shut off their mind to various harmonies that they might normally access. And of course, some further thoughts on the 10 of discs, because as I look at these cards, I just keep seeing things in them. Everything you read and have read in your life, that you actually paid attention to at all, essentially winds up dead and buried in your mind, so to speak. And that's what this tombstone symbolism is also conveying in this particular card. A tombstone is, of course, material that has been read. It's symbolic of that sort of thing here. And, as I stated before, a tombstone is something that people read. One of the things you do when you're reading or studying, in order to learn that material efficiently, you are focusing your attention on that material and excluding anything that would distract you from that study. And this helps you to learn material more efficiently. For example, people with ADHD, typically they are highly distractible individuals that have difficulty staying focused on task. And our culture at large seems to be weaponized to produce a kind of an ADHD-like condition into most people's lives. Where people become so distractible they can't focus on anything. And the ability to focus on task is important in the learning process. And these learning processes very efficiently pack things away into the unconscious mind. And it may seem like you haven't learned very much in your reading in the past, but you find out simply in everyday life that such is not really the case. You can bring information up. It might take some time, but you can bring it back up and make appropriate use of it. And this unconscious packing away and where you can access information you stored away in the past, this can become a mechanism for eventually filtering information out of your repertoire, your behavioral repertoire, your expressive repertoire, that just can't stand the test of time in regards remaining truthful or, useful. Its utility in truth is compromised to begin with. Therefore, the information that you're using reveals its value to you in time as truthful, whereas other information simply does not. So even if you're reading a book that constitutes disinformation, over time you're going to filter out information from that source in, your basically how you cycle information through your mind into and out of everyday use. So it's as though the mind has the ability to cleanse itself of untruthful information just in the way you use information over time. This is one of the reasons why cults can be so compulsory, because they insist upon their disinformation system being used as it is designed and expressed and conveyed and communicated to other people that way and no other way. Because this unconscious capacity for revealing truth in what you already know in how you use that information over time, compulsory cults just simply, they can't allow that to take place, or else their cult is threatened, you see. Truth is simply the truth, and you will be inclined as an individual to make use of information in a truthful manner, because that is the nature of you. And untruthful information will find its way into being filtered out of your living repertoire. Getting back into the secret alchemical tree, it helps to gain some historical perspective on this. And this kind of historical perspective isn't so much published, except maybe in the form of something like Göbekli Tepe. Okay? Itself an enigma of symbolic significance and its own kind of a glyph, like this Secret Tree of Alchemy is. But imagine yourself back, say, 15,000 years into human prehistory. And you are living your lives from day to day, hunting and gathering. Maybe just south of the colder regions that we would associate with the Ice Age. Maybe you're in Central Western Asia somewhere. And you're only semi-nomadic, or not even quite really all that much nomadic. Life is good. There's plenty of good hunting in the area, and gathering is good. So you've got time to spend entertaining yourself, essentially. And back then they didn't have television or gladiatorial jousts or anything crazy like that. Back then they had nature, the environment, each other, and their own minds to work with. And as anyone intellectual can tell you that's intellectually involved in life, and even in psychology, this is a valid approach to studying human psychology, people are inclined to form reality maps. They map ideas into their understanding in a systematic way. And I'm of the opinion this Secret Tree of Alchemy came from a group endeavor engaged in over the course of centuries by ancient peoples to develop a mind reality map, essentially using the same methods that people naturally use. People keep information and they categorize it, they store it away in their long-term memory. And the reason they categorize it is because ideas associate with other ideas of like kind. So your mind develops what are known as chunks of memory around specific concepts and ideas that are commonly experienced in life by people. And these memory chunks or clusters of specific memories you can think of as pointed clusters or clusters of ideas. Point meaning, destinational in nature. They group together relative to your perspective, looking back over the course of your life or looking at an idea. And other ideas tend to associate with these ideas you might be looking back at. And people take notice of this and they start to actively involve themselves in this activity, consciously involve themselves. And they begin associating ideas with other ideas and mapping it out. And I think this is how they came up with the Secret Tree of Alchemy over a long period of time. Certain ideas come up in human consciousness again and again and again, and they come up as important because they're useful survival tools to begin with. And if something's a useful survival tool, then you could probably categorize that with other similar ideas that are useful in thriving and getting joy out of life. And these ideas associate with one another. Thriving depends upon surviving first. And over time, you would begin to discern a harmony at work that relates these ideas and tends to arrange these ideas into separate clusters or chunks of ideation. And in time, people would discern, in this case, 13 separate chunks of ideation. And from that, they develop astrology as it originally looked prior to it becoming a disinformation system. Virtually everything today is a disinformation system, it seems like. We have so much literature available to study, and selecting out useful information is an important skill to stay healthy and not be driven crazy by too much information. You want good information, and you want to be able to understand it and pack it away in your mind in some usefully arranged manner that you can draw from. And you can learn to draw from that information collectivity, if you will, efficiently, so you can use the information in an appropriate manner relative to an emerging situation. For example, knowing how to do CPR under some circumstances of, an emergent nature that's an important skill. But you don't do CPR when you're taking a calculus test. So, under those circumstances, CPR is kept packed away on the back burner somewhere rather than being drawn forward and made use of. So you'll eventually realize that there are practices that you can use to prime ideas to the forefront of your mind for practical use. This is where you get a lot of the ritual activity of people. Certain times of the year they engage in certain ritual activities, often associated with such things as planting and harvesting and festival times and activities that are popular during certain times of the year. Maintaining relationships. What you're doing with a ritual is essentially priming your mind around a concept that you could is best described in terms of being a schema. You have very many schemata in your mind, and a memory chunk could consist of a bunch of related schemata. And you can pull one schema out from these schemata and make use of it. A common schema discussed in psychology would be something like post office. If you go into a post office, you know there's going to be a scale for measuring the weight of packages, and there are going to be mailboxes, and there's going to be mail personnel that help you process your mail and send packages and receive packages and can get you a mailbox, etc., etc., etc. And then, outside the post office there is a row of, post office boxes, or not post office boxes, but mailboxes. And that is the post office schema. And your mind has a way of packing that away. And this is what this Secret Tree of Alchemy is designed to map, is how your mind does these very things of retrieving information out of long-term memory and encoding it back into memory. And this is like an ancient version of what psychology's been doing for the past century and a half on a scientific level. People spent their time in ancient times studying their own minds. Now, at some point they get together and they share that information with each other, and they're very enthusiastic about it. And this is the basic of all cultism, really, is shared enthusiasm. So you wind up with cultic activities to include religious cults. And a genuine religious cult is something that is simply shared in mutual or group enthusiasm. And typically it consists of ritual activities which do pretty much what I've just described. They prime the mind. So in this case, we're talking about a cult, so we're talking about a group mind, a collective mind associated with a group of people. They get together, they perform ritual. It primes their group mind a certain way that they find to be satisfactory, so they maintain a cult for themselves. And it's when you run into problems of organized crime that these cults become of a compulsory nature and even a destructive nature. In fact, there's a continuum or a dimension of destructiveness and compulsion associated with cults of this nature. And anything compulsory, you find out eventually, is destructive somehow. Okay, if you're not free in your cultic activities, you're probably not free in other activities. Yet cultic activities can always be dangerous, even if you start out with the best of intentions, because somebody's going to want to draw a profit from that cult on an exclusive level, typically these days. And that's where compulsion comes in. How do we turn this into a compulsion rather than a shared enthusiasm? Once compulsion is introduced into cultic life, people in the cult become subject as studies themselves without their knowledge. People that are in leadership positions in the cult then are in good position to study lower ranking members in the cult. And you will have, invariably, a rank and file associated with such a cult. Leadership is no longer based upon example as much as who can maintain compulsory control over the cult. And the means of doing this are generally associated with personality traits that in modern times have come to be known as dark personality traits or dark triad traits. And people of a particularly strong Machiavellian bent turn out to be the best at maintaining compulsory control over a cult. These are people who can keep secrets and can present themselves well. They're very well-spoken individuals, for example. And they are also good in the executive function areas of life. So they can organize things and get people enthusiastic in supporting, occultic infrastructure based upon the introduction of compulsion into cultic life. And as studied subjects, it's eventually discerned by cult leadership that people become diseased as they continue to live under these cultic circumstances, especially from generation to generation. Compulsory life produces compulsion, and compulsion in the human characterological terms can best be described as neurosis. And in my opinion, neurosis is associated with a long-term destruction of human faculties, similar to what goes on with schizophrenia. Only it's far more deceptive and not nearly so obvious because it happens over such a long period of time. And the end state produced by neurosis is considered to be desirable, whereas in schizophrenia, the end state is never desirable. People are always afraid of something like schizophrenia, when there's a clear physiological destruction even associated with schizophrenia, which isn't nearly so obvious much of the time with neurosis, because neurotic people can come across as particularly graceful. Another word for it is glib, but if glib is normal, then that norm becomes the beatific norm, because what is typically beatific in society is that which is the norm. You have a normal nose, so you're considered to have, they consider you to have a beautiful nose because it's within a mid-range of, characteristics that they consider to be desirable. That's just, a small example, but it's the way things tend to work in society. People who fit in as normal are considered to be, to a minimal degree at least, or enough of a degree at least, the beautiful people. Now, this fitting in has much to do with maintaining a comfort level for most people within a cult, most of the time at least. And it then falls upon the leadership of the cult, the compulsory cult, to learn how to make use of even this fact. Okay, being normal has a lot to do with maintaining the comfort levels of people around you. And if you maintain their comfort levels, you're part of the beatific cultic existence. You're normal. You're one of the people. And Wilhelm Reich recognized how important comfort is to neurotic people, for example. If you want to keep them in a comfort zone, you don't remind them of their suffering, for example. And it just so happens that suffering is an inevitability in a compulsory cultic circumstance or a destructive cultic circumstance. It's a suffering existence. And cultic leadership then is challenged to come up with ways of breaking this suffering up into manageable parts via various ways of amplifying the enthusiastic aspects of cult life and extending them and getting people to become engaged in activities that cause euphoria and entranced euphoria, for example. That's just one of the ways they do it. But then on the other end of the spectrum, there's the idea that people becoming comfortable enough to begin to become creative. And, this is a way of finding your way back home to real enthusiasm. And that has to be broken up. So one of the ways you do that is to break people out of their comfort zone and get them engaged in group punishments where the misery associated with occultic existence is amplified. That becomes a means of maintaining the cult. And you'll wind up in this swinging back and forth seesaw of a love-hate existence, where the love aspects are amplified maybe one week, and then the suffering aspects of cultic life are amplified the next week. And this is always on the terms of cultic leadership. And they essentially are using these methods to keep you under their thumb, so to speak. And you'll be under the thumb of what amounts to a chain of command within the cult. You have cult leaders that are with you every day, and you've got other cult leaders that seem to be central and aloof and distant from, most of the cult membership much of the time. And they exploit you on this level by various means, the technicalities of which are beyond the scope of this presentation. But I needed to illustrate how important it is that people understand to a minimal degree how to avoid sliding into compulsory existence in developing and sharing enthusiasms. Imagine a Barbie cult, for example, becoming a compulsory cultic situation of a destructive scale. It boggles in the mind to think in terms of the possibility of such a thing, but if you can get people dependent upon you around the concept of Barbie, you've already started the process rolling along. Simplistic discussions of cultic lifestyle aside, we can now focus on how we come about producing this specific structure, this conceptual system of the Secret Tree of Alchemy. These ancient peoples eventually will get to the point where they are separating metaphysical concepts from natural concepts. This is where you run into nature versus a kind of nurture that one might describe as providence itself. Another word for it is God. But God's a very simple word that is easily misunderstood. And somehow providence really captures for me what this aspect of human life is all about. This aspect of human experience, where the mysteries of life are somehow providing for us. There are very many metaphysical concepts that run right into that whole area. And eventually these people would come to map these concepts into two general different parts of the Secret Tree of Alchemy. One is above and the other is below. And this is where you initially get the concept as above, so below. And below, then, of course, naturally enough, is associated with nature, the very bottom of which is biological function itself in the form of Pisces, low in the tree. This above and below aspect of existence can come under the effective control of the human mental faculties over time, at least as far as interpreting the meaning of things in nature is concerned, and in reality and in metaphysics. That is captured in much of the symbolism that winds up assigned to Virgo, which is right in the center of the tree. Tarot cards such as the Hermit and the Magus, or the Magician in some decks, symbolize this kind of as above, so below mastery. You define things in your world effectively. Therefore, your definitions tend to be popular with people. And you can effectively, over time, define culture and become, to a degree, cultural leadership or cultic leadership. And you do that naturally enough in life because of your example in life. You've become a kind of exemplar for people. And this is perfectly natural. It's not a compulsory thing. People do it because at one point in human history it was very much associated with everyday survival. The best leadership in your society exemplified how best to survive and even thrive. And this is where we get all of this enthusiasm today that presently channels into what is thought of as celebrity existence. These inclinations are still around and they are exploited. But getting back to what we were discussing, so the top half of the tree effectively becomes symbolic of providence or God. And effectively, so does anyone that develops mastery in the Virgo sense of the word, which is right in the center of the tree. You're at the pinnacle position in social existence to set examples, to make an example of yourself, to turn yourself into an exemplar. And sometimes you can even do this on a prototypical level, where you're completely novel in your example, which makes you some kind of a popular prototype in life. And that, finds its analog in modern times too, in the celebrity world. And then the bottom half of the tree then, of course, would be nature. And Sagittarius, right in the center of that, right above Pisces and below Virgo in the bottom half of the tree, then symbolizes functional nature, reality. Your individual nature, the nature of reality, the self on a personality level, and the situation. And we're going to be getting into the rulerships of the element around these two ideas of self and situation later. This is something I've been discovering of late in my maturation and understanding this tree. I finally am realizing, the traditional rulerships do in fact have a well-reasoned and legitimate place in this system, along with my own. Well, what I consider to be my own, because, when I walked into this 25 years ago, I was the little infant crawling along, narcissistic that way too, I guess. So I discovered the self half of that equation first, and the situation half of that equation was discovered later in life. And when I matured, and it just so happens that in life, when you mature, you're much better at handling the situation, right? So Sagittarius, the functional nature, right in the center of the bottom half of the tree. Then you got, right in the center of the top half of the tree, you've got Gemini, which is functional providence. It is functionally infinite in nature. How best to describe that is a mystery. But one way to approach it is from Cancer, which is collective in nature. Imagine a living matrix, a collectivity, if you will, where ideas are collected up, but somehow, mysteriously, ideas are swapped out for you as more appropriate to your life by some mysterious providence in your mind, which is Gemini, the functional providence of infinite scope somehow. So then you got this basic division between as above, so below in the tree. And it is functional, and it can be discerned in nature and in metaphysical concepts that humanity runs into again and again and again and again. There are certain metaphysical concepts that just never go away. Mind-body dualism, for example, never goes away. It's a philosophical concept that continues to exist. And monism, in comparison, is limited to a scientific outlook. Science is in a position to discover and demonstrate how human consciousness arises from the biology, and that's their perspective on that. And you can't really argue with it. But at the same time, mind-body dualism does not disappear. It's always there. And you can still be a Descartes fan. Another way that this tree is structured is into 3 pillars. The central pillars, of course, associated with function in general, are all of the primordial ideas, if you will, emphasize the concepts of function. And these are associated with immutable astrological signs. The other pillar, which from an anatomical position perspective, on the right side of the tree, numbered 2, 5, 8, and 11 on the chart, that is associated with the fixed astrological signs, and that symbolizes various forms of initiation, or at least the concept of initiation is emphasized there. Now over on the other side of the tree, on the cardinal pillar, where all of the cardinal astrological signs are symbolized, we have what you could think in terms of initiatives. These are like reserves, or energy reserves is one way of looking at it. So on the cardinal side, you have initiative emphasized all the way up and down the tree, and then over on the fixed side, you have initiation, which is really just the application of force. You are taking the initiative and you are applying force in accordance with its nature to produce a function in the center of the tree, where all the mutable signs are assigned. And then you have an output, which is a new form of initiative to draw from. So this initiative has an application of force associated with it that you would call a certain kind of initiation. That application of force produces yet again a function in the center of the tree, which then again produces an output which takes the natural form of an initiative or energy reserve to draw from. And this goes on all the way down the tree, from the top to the bottom, and manifesting ultimately the material world and biological function down in Pisces on the bottom of the tree. Now, Pisces on the bottom of the tree, being physical, has its opposite on the top of the tree, which is also a Pisces high, that is spiritual. And on the top of the tree there, that is the specific place where the concept of spirit as an element is assigned. It is categorized as Pisces high. Since we are discussing the elements already, for example, in Pisces high, we discuss the element that is described or called spirit, the fifth element, if you will. We may as well discuss elements in general. Pisces, for example, is assigned 3 elements in this tree. Spirit up high, and down below, Pisces is ruled in the system I walked into on a self level by the element of earth, on a functional level. And alchemically speaking, it is a precipitate sign, and it's functional on that level, being in the center pillar of the tree. As far as traditional elemental rulership is concerned, though, Pisces is ruled, if I remember correctly, by the element of water. Now, the traditional rulerships I discovered recently, and as illustrated in the various tarot cards, they illustrate a situation, the perspective of situation. And the other elemental rulership, which is the self-orientation or the self-perspective, describe what you would be from that perspective of that astrological sign. So from a self-perspective, if you want to be Pisces low, you are earth elemental in your function at that level. Whereas the situational perspective of Pisces low is that of water. The situation that is best associated with Pisces, or biological function, is watery in nature. But Pisces on a biological function level, as far as its own being is concerned, as far as its self-perspective is concerned, is earth elemental. And all of the top cards and all of the stacks capture this symbolism. I need to explore this issue further myself. I've been struggling a bit with it for the past several weeks. And I find myself walking right into this level of discovery, same as I did all those years ago when I first started studying this map of alchemy, of nature, of metaphysics, of reality, of the mind. To conclude, I should probably just discuss, since we're getting an hour into this, in very general terms, you could think of this tree as a stepping down process of spirit into matter. And it describes a relationship between spirit and matter, ultimately. But it really describes all the steps involved in any type of reality manifestation or explication. So Pisces high is solute, alchemically speaking. It symbolizes a spirit, a specific spirit. As a solute influence means you're not dreaming it, but it's influencing you from a field harmonic perspective. And Aries, and it just goes Aries as pure oblivion, and then Taurus, then Gemini, then Cancer, then Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces all over again. And you can stack these trees one on top of one another to describe two different dimensions if you wanted to. I haven't really done this exercise myself. I've been too busy studying the tree over the years and using it as a reality map and a mind map. And it works superbly that way. In fact, I'm better at using it than I am at describing it. In fact, describing this is bringing back all kinds of memories that are, shall we say, surfacing back into awareness rather slowly. And I will just leave you with that for now, and thank you for listening.